So, since I have been dealing with sickness the last couple years, dealing with this COVID on and off with the new variants, was hit by all the different variants, okay? And doing my own demon purging, and you're seeing that. But I haven't, I gained a little bit of weight, but not a lot. Okay? Not a lot. And so there's so many different body types out there that when you are obese or you've been gaining weight progressively the last couple of years because of the COVID, and who's to say how you dealt with it when you were afflicted by it, but then this last round you didn't take antibiotics. This last round you just stayed in bed or dealt with all the different symptoms and you ate food. But you're proud that you didn't deal with antibiotics and you got through it. But then you noticed that you were gaining a lot of weight. Now, why am I saying this? Because I know someone that dealt with COVID, was proud they didn't take antibiotics, and I see them even gaining more weight. Yeah, that's going to be difficult for those who already have a predisposed issue and have been gaining a lot of weight the last few years. How do you lose the weight without losing substance? And here's the thing, you have to get sick. You have to start triggering those beasts within. See, those that need to get back in the workforce because that's how they're making a living, you either have to take care of yourself and do enough of the J juice to trigger the sickness and actually be sick and stay sick and no more J juice until you're done being sick. And then when you're not sick anymore, drink J juice to bring up more sickness if you can. And that's what I'm saying. That's what's going to take. Okay? Because I see it already that those that have the predisposed issues of obesity or other issues, simply just not taking antibiotics and not doing J juice too, or even doing a little bit, and then you're back out there in the game taking on more antibodies, you still have an atrophied alimentary canal at the top and the bottom. And so there is still massive replication, but there is no maximum release that's not taking off substance. And so then you are going to start blowing up and blowing up and blowing up. And I see that in a lot of different people, even those who have taken part in the medical holistic system after they had COVID, you see them gaining weight progressively. Okay? And that's all part of this whole thing. And so the fact that I've been sick back to back, where people are just like tripping out, and then now those who are elderly or those who are watching what I'm saying and what I'm doing, and they now want to take part in this and do this, and they have family members who are concerned. Yeah, they should be concerned because you don't know what diseases inside are going to be tripped up, and you have to really take that inventory to make sure that you are willing to face those demons, because sometimes those demons could be where you can't see, you can't speak, you can't hear, you can't walk. Okay, maybe you can't talk. And so you have to be prepared for the worst. Not saying that you couldn't survive it, you could as long as you prepare for it. But what happens is you start triggering something that's already predisposed, yes, and then something else happens, and then you're not prepared to deal with it. Then when they take you to the hospital because they don't know how to respond to what you want them to do because you weren't clear on how you want people in your world to respond to your situation that you need help in, then you get antibiotics and you set the programming wherever it's at. And so if you can't hear, speak, or talk or whatever, and you're getting antibiotics and you may regain certain functions back, but you may lose other functions forever until you're willing to face the pain and deal with the pain again. And so, this isn't for the faint of heart. Okay, I want to give everybody a chance to regain what was taken from them in the medical holistic industry, and as well as what the platform your parents gave you, unbeknownst or intentional, but it takes work. It can't be half-assed. It can't be like, well, I'm going to work 80 hours a week or 40 hours a week, and then also only deal with, the COVID when it comes around, but you still have predisposed issues inside, like so many of them. And they have to be triggered. If not, they are incubating and the monster inside is getting big. And if you're not releasing the monster, then that monster is exponentially just magnifying itself. And so, I'm observing a lot. I'm looking at people before the COVID. I'm looking at them after the COVID or during this COVID process. And yeah, people's bodies are changing. And they don't see it because they don't feel bad. And when they do feel something, they're taking their antibiotics or they're just laying in bed and dealing with it that way. But there's still a whole lot more if you're in the JJ world that you need to do. And once you do trigger that monster inside, that childhood monster inside, you got to give it the time. And again, if you have put yourself in a position where you have to be out there pounding the pavement, then you're going to wait for another breakthrough infection. And then, yes, your body is going to be doubling in size, doubling, tripling. And that's the nature of this beast, literally. Because in a high incubation climate like this, where it's hot, that's a lot of reproduction. That's like when you take the chili juice and you ferment it. In a colder climate, it's a slower fermentation, just slower growth, right? In a hot climate, faster growth. That's why there's brain-eating amoebas and a lot more of the microbes that are deadly out there, because they are multiplying exponentially. Not only out there in the fresh waters and in the ocean, but also in your gut, in your microbiome. That's full of the viruses that run the parasites, the protozoa, the proteins, the fungus, and bacteria. And so then you really have to be even more aware that the predisposed issues you hold inside are also replicating exponentially. And so when you do finally trigger that breakthrough infection, whatever it is, and it's not just the COVID, okay, but it could be everything that your genetic line holds. That is a gift from the angels, but you have to give it time. You cannot try to accelerate the healing process. You have to eat, you have to sleep, you have to get the poop out, you have to blow your nose, you have to sleep. You're going to have to tell everybody around you to leave you alone. And is that possible if you're a single mother, if you're watching a baby? I mean, I don't know, but you have to set your life up for it to give time to maturing that inner child that is rearing its ugly head. Okay? And if you don't give time to your inner child and allow it to mature, you will have a bunch of children who are immature in your body that will wreak havoc and eat you out of house and home and shut down the whole house, which is your body. That's what children do. They eat you out of house and home and they shut down the whole house. They take down the house. That's why all the horror movies about children. All right. And so I figured out my own demons. I figured out how I'm going to lay it all out, and I can't wait to pull up my juvenile records. Actually, a couple years ago when I applied to take the FINRA test, which is to be like a licensed agent that also trades stocks and does that and able to do variables, I guess that's what it is. When I wanted to be an agent, and I was, and so they wanted a background check, and they wanted to know if I committed any crimes. And I was like, well, there's my juvenile record. I stole a pair of pants, was in juvie for like 30 days. And so I guess they wanted to see that because FINRA is even really, really sensitive to who holds those kind of variable license. And so when I did look up my juvenile record, I actually cried when I read it. I remember it devastated the fuck out of me to read that memory when I was a teenager with like hickeys all down my neck from some situation. Oh my God, that was crazy. That was crazy. why would someone my age be into that? And believe me, I didn't lose my virginity until I was 18, but I definitely was out of control on so many levels. And so when you're reading that about yourself, when you had hickeys on your neck like that, when you're like 15, 16, that's horrible. That was so horrible, but that was a demon that I couldn't face. I remember that was crazy. And so there's a reason why juvenile records get sealed, to protect those that instilled that kind of behavior, that made you act that way, because you wouldn't act that way if it wasn't programmed somewhere. And so, yeah, to read that and to understand that, so the juvenile records protect those that do that, and then also protect the person from having to revisit their past and the shame of it, so then they don't talk about it or even look at it and try to move on. But that still runs you in the background, okay? And that's why California says automatically when you're 18, all of your juvenile records get sealed. But like here in Ohio, they don't automatically seal your records in here. Why is that? California has a lot more issues going on because of all the different programming, the MK Ultra programming, the platforms. There's so many people in California that are in jail and or in mental institutions because of all the experiments done, mass level experiments done. That's why California is like the land of the crazies. Well, there's a reason why, with so many of the behavioral psychologists doing mass amounts of experiments. And that's where, the whole Haight-Ashbury and UC Berkeley, San Francisco. Oh my gosh. And so then you realize that's why California has such a reputation. Yes, it's innovation, but there's also where all the serial killers are. It's also where a lot of the people who are messed up because of that. Okay? It's not, I wasn't raised in the ghetto. I wasn't raised by indigents. I was raised by upper middle class. And so what would then cause an adoptee from Vietnam who had absolutely no genetic predisposition or no genetic relationship to my parents, and how much can you blame as far as behavior on pneumonia and war baby stuff? And so then you have to look at nurture. Okay? And so that's down the road. Okay? When I'm ready to go and look at those records again, that's down the road. I'll write because that will be another book, because that needs to be put out there, because we have too many people who are running from those types of situations that run them, and that's the monster. That's what's trapping them. That's what's torturing them. That's what's stopping them from growing. Okay? And so the justice system isn't always about justice for good. It's also a justice where it covers up the shit that was done in the government and the government's academia. And so again, I could see where Kaczynski was so mad at the academics. I'm not mad at them. I know there is a fine line between experiments and innovation and learning new concepts, but at the expense of children, at the expense of humans that had no idea, just like the Tuskegee Airmen. But see, when you adopt somebody, it's not like whatever happens in the household is privacy, right? Until you can prove anything else. But if people are so adept at hiding stuff and it's all psychological, that's where shit gets fucking evil. Okay? So you have to understand there's some strategy. That's why I'm very strategic, because I knew someone was strategically doing something to where I couldn't come back. I couldn't come back on them and say, well, I was this. No, there wasn't it was mostly psychological, some physical, but mostly psychological programming that was going on. And that can really fuck with your head. Okay? And that's why I'm saying to you guys, you have to realize that there's a lot of psychological programming, even in mainstream media, in the right wing, in the left wing, in the way, way, way left, in the way, way, way right, InfoWars, all of these different news outlets that are trying to drive your opinion and drive your emotions, they are manipulating the crap out of you. That's why I knew something was going on with the whole COVID and the lockdowns and being locked up in the house and all this other shit, and people are freaking out. And I'm just like, I'm used to it. I'm used to being isolated. I've been isolated for fucking years. So, and it was just like it was just, for some reason, the whole thing was really familiar. The whole rollout of the COVID and all the shit that's said on TV, Fox, CNN, InfoWars, it's so familiar. And so this shit's been going on. The planning of rolling out the psychological operations and everything else has been going on for years. And okay, I understand, for the good of society, but at the expense of the individuals who are now suffering, which then is a reason why they're doing the whole reset, because there's so much suffering. Okay? I mean, my poor sister was destroyed by all of that. I didn't know half the shit because I was out of the house at 15, so she had 3 more years to deal with that stuff. So I have no idea what she had to deal with for 3 fucking years, which I can understand why we don't talk, because I wasn't there for 3 years. I couldn't protect her and all that, and I had my own issues with that. Yeah, once I left the house, I was gone. And so came back for a minute when in my 20s, I'd go back to school again, but that didn't work. So you see, I'm purging my demons. And after having that last round of COVID and the pneumonia and the searing pain and the anger of the antibiotics and the medical holistic industry compounding all of the trauma on top of the trauma on top of the trauma, and then when you finally deal with your biological trauma, physical trauma, then you got to deal with the psychological trauma, and that in of itself is its own thing. And so that's what I'm saying. The whole JJ meta mentality is not for the faint of heart. First of all, the biological trauma, the physical trauma is painful, and then once you finally get to the psychological and intellectual trauma, that's also another thing that you have to deal with. And it's nonstop until you can finally release and expose the beast. And so that's why I want you guys to use Facebook in a way that makes sense, that is not demonizing or slamming or blaming or, being slanderous. But you have to find a way to get it out. And then the whole thing with Sigmund Freud versus Jungian, when I realized that, the person that raised me was practicing the Jungian psychology, the archetypes, then it all makes fucking sense. I've known Freudian analysts, and they're all talk therapy, right? Talk. And here I am I'm on Facebook Live, and I'm talking. Streams of thought, I'm talking, and things are connecting. And I'm making my own observations. I'm analyzing my own behavior. Some of you are probably analyzing me too. That's great. Okay? But then there's something to be said for Freud and how people do filter their world through sex and love and reproduction, and then how their parents raise them. And I'm like, you know what? I actually agree with Freud. He actually makes more sense than Jung. Jung, okay, I understand the archetypes. That's all programming. And then crossbreeding the programming of Jungian and Freudian, and then behavioral scientists that then do stimulus experiments and all that, and put people under stressful situations and or developing situations that didn't exist, but just to see how people react, and then doing a divide and conquer. That's what happened in our household. My sister and I were divided and conquered, and we were made to basically kill each other, not literally, but psychologically destroy each other. So then when we grow up, we don't talk to each other and say anything, exchange any kind of information. And when we're not talking, we're not sharing anything as far as what happened. And then the person who played that game is home free. No one's talking to each other, so the beast doesn't get exposed. That's some fucking strategic shit there. That's how evil some of the psychological operations that are going on in high levels of government and in Fox, CNN, and InfoWars and all the different NPR, that's what you're dealing with, is that kind of DARPA-related psychological ops. And when you have a master's in science, a bachelor's and a master's in science, that's the household I raised, then you put 2 and 2 together. But it's taken about 50 fucking years to do it. 50 years of programming wore off. So yes, some of you are correct about the whole Illuminati, MK Ultra. That's the pejorative. But it's happening even, well, even those that are uncovering that are still being psychologically psyoped. Okay? Because they're not looking at even the bigger picture, that they're even a victim of it too. And so then now you have to question your politics, your religion, and your science. How do you know how much? It's all psychological operations. It's like this whole thing with the student loans and the Joe Biden stuff and the Trump stuff. None of them can buy my vote because I don't vote. If they're in office and they put through legislation, it's for the good of the country, and that's it. Anyone that thinks that they can buy me or thinks that that's, what I'm going to do is I'm being bought because of legislation because I have student loans. No, I don't fucking vote. I already said that a couple years ago. I don't vote. None of them represent me, and if they do put in legislation, it's for the good of the whole country. And if you don't like it, well, whatever. Who cares? So there's a lot. We've been under so much psychological operations. And then when you experience it personally at the household level, and then you see it roll out in the community level, the state level, the nation level, and then the world level, okay. Then you see from the micro to the macro, okay? We're not in a democracy. We're in a dictatorship. Just like my mom said, this is not a democracy. You're being manipulated into thinking you have a choice when really you don't have any choices. You just got to do what you got to do and adapt to the changes, and that's it. You have a choice. You can buy, chocolate or vanilla, but that's superficial choices. When it comes to the economy and everything else, the decisions are already made. When it comes to your health care and whatever, you either participate in the remedies and the surgeries and all that shit, or you don't. Those are the choices you have. And if you don't, then you got to deal with the pain. I don't want to deal with pain. Then go back into the system. And then everyone's all scared to deal with the pain. Well, that was the fear. That was the psychological operations. Your fear of pain is what caused you now to be where you are today. So now finally the psychological shit is pouring out of me. And I'm being very careful not to be defamatory, because I don't want to be defamatory, but I have to get it out. This is the only fucking way I can get it out, because no one out there understands what I went through. And people that did understand what I went through, they're not talking to me because we've been programmed to be divided and conquered and hate each other. So, okay, so yeah. So anyway, so it's like, this is the only venue. Is to do it publicly and shamelessly, abso-fucking-lutely, because now the beast can't hide anymore. And a lot of you probably have the same situation, especially in Silicon Valley and any other upper middle class that was part of some research programs in the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, even today, the people in my class that are in psychology today, that are a psychologist, psychotherapist, psychiatry, and shit's going on, and they're doing research on how to do whatever, and they got pretty families. Of course they do. When you're collecting souls like that, you're getting paid a shit ton of money. And so, yeah. And so people of the 80s, when they were doing that stuff, yeah, there was so much money in the 80s. God, there was so much money. All right, I gotta go. Talk to you later. Bye.